Hi guys, I'm Giselian and the Voice of Reason, and I want to tell you a Christmas story today. Now this is probably going to upset some people, but just the way it is. Remember, it's just a story, and remember it's Christmas. Goodwill to all men and women and all that type of thing, okay? So I spent a lot of time when I was in intelligence looking at the various different religions of the people that we were going to potentially face. And I wanted to get inside their mind, and I wanted to know what they thought and how they thought and why they were so adamant in that. So I studied Judaism, I studied Islam, and I studied Christianity, and became quite a bit of a scholar in all of those elements. And then I embarked upon a spiritual journey as well. So I've seen a lot of what goes on and what the belief systems are that motivate people's actions. So I want to tell a story that you're probably very, very familiar with, although you're not familiar with the ending, and you're not familiar with some of the elements to it. Now, remember, this is a story, but I would encourage you to do your own research. And when there is context in the story where I believe that these are actual truths, then I'll tell you, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so let's start with Judea during the time of Jesus Christ. There were four major elements to Judean society at that point. There were the Sadducees and the Pharisees, which are basically like the judiciary and the priesthood. There were the Maccabees, which were the zealots. They were trying to overthrow the Roman Empire. And indeed, Judas Iscariot, Judas is of the Iscari tribe, were part of the zealots. And it was basically a very, very curvy knife that they used to assassinate people. That's what Judas was. And everyone thought Judas was a bit of a SOB anyway, so they're probably right. And then you had the Essenes, and the Essenes were very much what we would imagine Christians to be if they got it right, okay? So they were the healers, they were the people that guarded sacred texts, they were the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls, for instance. And in that, even they talk about two brothers being called the Star and the Wicked Priest. And this is an allusion to the real identity of potentially Jesus Christ being the star, okay, and the wicked priest being Judas, which is another element to it. I can go into that at another point, but Jesus was basically a twin, okay, and the Vatican even know this. And that's why you had Thomas Didymus, Thomas the twin, to check Jesus after the crucifixion, okay, so who better to know him than his own brother, okay. And that is in the Gospel of Thomas. Okay, first line in the Gospel of Thomas is Jesus walks into the room and says, "Hey, Thomas, my brother." And it wasn't like, "Hey, bro." It was Thomas, my actual brother, in Aramaic. So the Gospel of Thomas was spirited out of the Vatican by a researcher, I think in the 40s, and you can now actually read it now. Anyway, I digress. So at the end of the crucifixion, whether Jesus actually was crucified on a cross or not is debatable. Certainly wasn't crucified on a cross. No one was ever crucified on a cross. They were crucified on a T. So they would have the beam that was attached to their hands as they walked through. These uprights were found all over Roman conquest countries. And they were like telegraph poles. They were huge. So you wouldn't be carrying these things around. And they just used to put you on top of one of these things. But anyway, a whole bunch of things about the crucifixion, which we can go into at another stage. But at the end of the crucifixion, even in the Bible, it says that he was attended to by Miriam and Mary. Okay, so that's Mary the mother, and then Mary Magdalene. Now, if you understand Jewish law, even today, Jewish law, a body cannot be touched unless they have been either sanctioned by a religious entity, and that's very, very strict, or the mother or the wife. Those are the only people that are allowed to touch a dead body. So for Jesus to be touched by Mary Magdalene at the end of the crucifixion meant that she would have to have been his wife. And we see this as well in the wedding at Canaan. Okay, so in the wedding of Canaan, we see Mary Magdalene coming back into the story 1,000 miles from where we originally saw her, where she was about to be stoned and all that type of thing. Totally fabrication. But the guy comes out at the wedding and says, "Master, right, we have no wine," as if it's Jesus's fault that they haven't got a wine. However, if you understand Judaic history and the understanding of their culture, the the master in that way at that wedding is the master of the house. And this is why even today grooms sit at the head of the table on their wedding day and the parents sit to one side. And that is because for that day they became master of the house. And guess what the groom had to do apart from turning up? There was only one thing that the groom had to do, and that was provide wine for the guests. So when someone was coming out and going, "Master, we have no wine," it's like, hey, you know, you and your missus get in here and you need to give us some wine. But this is a story, of course. So what we have then is that they wrapped Jesus in a shroud. And that shroud, found its way to Turin eventually. And this shroud is something remarkable. And I believe that it's one of the biggest clues and the biggest evidences for the existence of Jesus Christ as a person. So, because everyone's been after this shroud for a long time, it was actually called the Mandylion at one point. And they wrapped him in the shroud, and at that point, we never saw, right, until like I think it was the early 60s, where the actual image of Jesus Christ, as we see it now in the Turin Shroud, was actually discovered. It's only with the aspect of photography did we actually discover it. But however, the Knights Templar had a folded shroud with the face of Jesus on, which they called the Mandylion. And we know exactly where that was all the way through from Israel, all the way through to, I think it was Constantinople. And at the fall of Constantinople, it moved. And this was one of the relics that the Knights Templar had. It's one of the big secrets as well that the Knights Templar had in his story, of course. So you have these two women touching Jesus. Now, imagine, right? Imagine that he's on the cross and he does the whole thing of, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Now, at some point, what happened during the crucifixions, and we know this through our archaeology, is that as a mercy, they would come in and they would break the femurs and fibulas of the condemned, and you had to pay for that. Okay, so as you broke the legs, they would then collapse, and then they would asphyxiate within minutes, as opposed to being up there for days on end, in a very, very painful, very bad death. So they had, you got to go back to the original prophecy, okay? And the prophecy said that in the waters of the Jordan, the new Messiah will be recognized by the reincarnation of Elijah, which was actually John the Baptist, okay? So this is Jesus being baptized in the Jordan. And that he would grow to the point at the age of 33, which is a significant number, and that he would walk into Jerusalem, that he would be betrayed, and that he would be killed and then rise again after 3 days. And then, this is where it gets different, wearing the armor of David, he would then march triumphantly into Jerusalem and throw off the Roman aggressors. Okay, that was the prophecy, and that was prophesied by over 200 prophets. So what happens when you have a prophecy and it's getting towards that time of Passover where the prophecy needs to actually work? Well, you make the prophecy happen. And he was betrayed. Who by? By Judas. He knew exactly. I mean, it's even in the Bible. Do what you must do. He knew what was going to happen, okay? In this story. So he is then prosecuted. He is then placed through this horrific crucifixion with the knowledge that he would be relieved, taken down, and then march triumphantly into Jerusalem 3 days afterwards. And the clues are in the Bible, and you can check all of this, right? You can check all this. The clues are in the Bible. He's up there and he says, "I thirst." So they send up a sponge of vinegar. Really? You're going to give a guy vinegar when he says that he's thirsty? Why not water? Well, we know what the vinegar was. It's actually a sedative. because at that point they're not going to be doing post-mortems. Okay, so you send up the sedative, he sucks on it, and then immediately he's gone, right? So they then bring him down off the cross before the leg breaking, because you can't walk triumphantly into Jerusalem when you've got broken legs. So they had to get him down off the cross. However, what screwed it up, and this is where almost like the demonic stuff comes in, because there was Longinus, okay, the centurion, who then tries to test whether he's alive or not by sticking a spear in his side. And it says in the Bible, out came blood and water, which is a pretty fatal wound. So they got him down off the cross, and at that point, and these wounds are obviously consistent with the Turin Shroud as well. Also, what is consistent with the Turin Shroud is where the nails went in. In most pictures and art, all the way through the centuries, the nails always shown going through the hand. That never happened, never happened. So that would then rip through the hands if you put weight on it. So that's not how they did it. They put it through the wrist, okay? And we know this through archaeology. So, and that is consistent with the wounds in in the Turin Shroud, yeah, which people thought was a Da Vinci fake, until they realized that actually it was consistent with the threads and actually the pollen of Judea during that time. Anyway, this is the first part of the story, okay? I'm just looking at the timing. It's gone 11 minutes, oh my God. Anyway, I've got much more of the story, because you're going to find out what the nativity really is. So check in for the next part of this story. And remember, it's a story. It's just a story. Don't hate me. Don't hate me. Don't put a fatwa on me. It's just a story, okay? Bye-bye.